some steamed crabs.
Okay. Let-
Sounds about right.
Let's bring the meeting to order. This is the Queen Anne's County Planning Commission for Thursday, May the 8th, 2025. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Public comment? Do you have anything? Okay. Updates, legislation and legal matters.
Good morning. Amy Mordock, Planning Director. I have a few legislative updates and general updates. Just to let you know that even though the legislative session has just ended and not all of the bills have been signed, there are already work groups forming to address the next slate of bills, especially those related to the governor's housing bill, which did not move this year, but certainly will next year. And there's another work group that will address certificate, the CPCN process for solar siting for community solar projects. And there are some fixes that are necessary for Senate Bill 931, which was the solar bill. So there are work groups forming that will begin meeting in June in preparation for the next cycle. I also wanted to let you know that the Chester Haven Beach comprehensive rezoning request, that decision made by the commissioners as a part of the comprehensive plan update, that decision has been appealed. So there are 3 court cases that have been filed. One is a petition for judicial review in circuit court. Another is a judicial review of the Board of Appeals decision. And then thirdly, there's a complaint for declaratory relief. We did receive one decision. Lindsay can help me if I misspeak. One court decision ruled that the county commissioners in their decision-making made a decision as a legislative body and not an administrative body, so that case was dismissed. And so we have been asked to produce a discovery request was made, so we've been asked to, we already submitted all of our files related to the actions and our case history of the Chester Haven Beach property, but we've been asked to find any correspondence that we may have had relative to Chester Haven Beach from the Critical Area Commission. So that's where that those actions are resting. They're, just to let you know, they're still going through the judicial process. Wanted to also let you know that there are some Department of Transportation studies that are currently going on, and these studies are specific to what are called Section 106 reviews, which are studies of impacts on historic property, structures, archaeology. There's currently a study looking at potential improvements that are not substantive in nature, more signage, striping, camera work for Route 50 to Ocean City. So there's an assessment of historic structures within that corridor. And also the Bay Crossing study, the Tier 2 study. There was a meeting yesterday where, again, archaeological impacts and impacts on historic structures are being discussed. So just to let you know, staff is engaged in some MDOT studies, and as soon as we have anything substantive to report to you, we will. Finally, I have a few personnel updates. We have filled the senior planner position. Mary Ellen Gray will be joining our staff on the 4th of June. She comes to us with over 20 years of public planning experience and about 30 years of general planning experience. I don't know if Stephanie wants to add any.
Sure. Yeah, her years of experience are very exciting. During the interview, she was very down to earth, very, very friendly, easy
Where's
to
she
talk
come
to.
from?
Delaware. So she'll be coming, I think, Camden area.
Is she moving to the area or?
No, she'll be driving.
Not that we
every day.
know of,
But
yeah.
that's, but yeah, I'm very excited to be able to hand some projects over after some training and to move on to some bigger long-range planning stuff that I need to get back to. So it's very exciting.
And then we have one more vacancy in our permit technician crew, and interviews were conducted yesterday, and more interviews will be conducted on Friday, so hopefully we'll be fully staffed again soon.
Great.
Yep. So Stephanie Jones, Long Range Principal Planner. The citizen-sponsored text amendments that you heard last month, they will be going to the commissioners next week to be introduced. Also, the amendment or the citizen-sponsored text amendment you're hearing today, depending the outcome, that will go also next week to the commissioners for their introduction. And the cannabis regulations that we looked at earlier in the beginning of the year, those will be on the commissioners' agenda next week for their public hearing. So I'll let you know the follow-up ones.
Okay.
And also on that same agenda, just to let you know where these projects are in the process, Aspire and Barnstable, which are residential subdivision applications and residential development of townhomes. Those applications have moved beyond concept and have requested amendments to the comprehensive water and sewer plan to be added to the service area. At their last meeting with the county commissioners, the commissioners requested fiscal impact studies, which are different from the adequate public facility study. Those studies have been completed, and there will be an informational meeting regarding both applicants' requests for amendments to the comprehensive water and sewer plan, and those studies will be discussed also at the informational meeting with the commissioners next Tuesday.
Who will be in those meetings? Are you presenting it or who's presenting it?
No, so these sit with the Department of Public Works, Water and Wastewater. So the water and wastewater team will be staffing those meetings, but the presentation of materials in terms of that fiscal impact will be given by the applicant's consultant.
Okay. All right. Citizen-sponsored text amendment. Stephanie Jones.
So this is the last of the citizen-sponsored text amendments that were submitted to the county. This amendment is specifically to amend the transfer of development rights program in order to allow the transfer of parcel to be subdivided or reconfigured, specifically for building pads, perk sites, lot line adjustments, but then to not allow additional lots to be created. The transfer of parcel is basically when development rights are lifted within the transfer of development rights program, that area becomes what is known as the transfer of parcel. Those lands are specifically restricted based on the criteria of the soils. So that land then becomes open space, which is then restricted to particular uses that are identified in the code, strictly all agricultural uses. So what happens is, once they're lifted, according to the transfer of parcel, currently the code says that those transfer of parcels cannot be subdivided or reconfigured, and that's been longstanding in the code since I think the program was created in the late 80s. But also within that TDR section of the code, it also says that this is a permanent deed restriction. So basically it's saying those soils are permanently deed restricted and protected in the location of that transfer parcel. One thing that I would like to highlight in this amendment, it talks about reconfiguration and administrative subdivisions. So I think it's important to notice the difference between those two actions. Reconfiguration would be changing the acreage or the land area in which that transfer of parcel is located. So essentially it could be changing the soils that were deed restricted. An administrative subdivision would essentially be changing the property line would not be changing those soils that had previously been deed restricted.
You're saying that they're, deed restricted permanently?
Yes.
Then how can you change that?
Well, according to the code, it says that it cannot be, and the amendment is to allow for, specifically for reconfiguration and administrative subdivisions, specifically to accommodate perk sites, lot line adjustments, and building pads.
Why wouldn't you do that on an individual basis and get a variance or,
There's no variance. Since the code specifically says it's not permitted, the code has to be changed in order to do so. And then the code also says, within the legal document that lifts those development rights, it also says that, further again states that it can't be subdivided or reconfigured. So even when that legal document is drafted, it's required by the code to say in that legal document that that can't occur. So if this amendment is favorable today, the applicant is going to want to address that as well, because if we address it in one part of the code and not the other, it's still not going to be favorable for the applicant in the end. One thing to note too is this could be a precedent setter. We do have other programs where we lift development rights. You've probably heard the non-contiguous development right program, where that lifts development rights in the ag district, places it back down in the ag district, specifically for residential uses. That code also says that it can't be subdivided or reconfigured. There is a section that says if it's prior to 1999, it may be reconfigured, and I think that was just something in the code that had maybe changed, but after that point in time, you cannot reconfigure that open space transfer parcel area. So this changes to this, the transfer of parcel language. Essentially, someone could come in and ask for the same amendment to the code for non-contiguous. So think about it more of a holistic manner to all conservation open space programs that the county has, not just this one probably. Let's see. And a couple other things I wanted to point out that you might want to consider looking through this is the fact that in the application it does say to accommodate for building pads, perk sites, and lot line adjustments. It needs to be clear whether it's for new perk sites, new building pads. Building pads were something that were created when those rights were restricted. Basically, someone would carve out a little spot in order to build a house. So those building pads still exist, probably on a lot of those TDR open space areas. It's just that we'd want to understand whether if it's for something new, it would need to be clarified.
It wasn't a lot of record. It's just a vacant pad site.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, staff is not giving a specific recommendation, but really wants the Planning Commission to talk through this to understand the nuances between reconfiguration, administrative subdivision, but also then really understand the purpose of that open space, the historical, why the TDR program was created in order to preserve those lands, and then also, like I mentioned, in relation to the non-contiguous development, be sure that we're looking at it at a high-level view. Also, in your staff report, there is a map that shows the lands where that are those transfer development rights deed restricted lands. So if you want to have an idea as to where they are located in the county, it's in your staff report.
excuse me a second, did we lose?
So we're having some issues with Breezeline Internet that's closing out Zoom because it has 1 second dropouts. It's not affecting our meeting, it's not affecting TV or any of our streams. It's just affecting our Zoom account.
And Jeff.
So I'm gonna try to hook it up to to the county network.
Okay, you want to give a minute so that he's here for the meeting?
He is back now, can hear everything.
Oh.
Just,
Okay.
it keeps happening. I'm
Can
trying
we
to fix
hear
it.
him? Because it looks like a blank to me.
Yeah. He
Morning,
should.
Madam Chair, can you hear me?
We can. You have this great look about you.
But that's all I have for my staff report, but if the applicant wants to address anything, or if you have questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Stephanie and I talk about this. You've got to file these.
You have to introduce yourself.
Oh, Jeffrey Thompson, not acting, well, I am acting as counsel for Shirley Schaefer, but I'm also here individually today. Both of us share a common problem, if you will. You have to file the request for the text amendment, it's first 10 days of February. Stephanie and I talked about the amendment. I understand what her concerns are, but would have been appropriate in my mind to amend that amendment. My attitude was we'll address it through this process, through, today and before the commissioners. It's not my intent to ever reconfigure anything. So I
Then why would you put it in there?
I know. I modeled this after I did the text amendment for the
Non-contiguous.
non-contiguous years ago. I modeled this amendment after that. It went through smoothly. I did not consider the soil types issues and some of the issues that have been raised by Stephanie. Unintended consequences on my part. The only thing I'm really looking for is to be able to administratively subdivide. I think in her recommendation, she suggested if you were to approve it, only administrative subdivision with no opportunity to reconfigure, and that's all I'm looking for. There are practical difficulties when you go to subdivide after TDRs are on the property. It's not about my farm, but I'm going to give you it as an example, and also Shirley. About 20 years ago, we sold a portion of a farm that my dad owned with two other gentlemen. Our family farm was next door. The other two gentlemen wanted to sell. My father did not want to sell. So we added a third of that farm onto our farm, not being able to subdivide it where we wanted to because of TDRs. So what I did was I created a perpetual easement for this 11 acres that was at issue, which gave us the entire beneficial interest of the 11 acres. Over that part of the TDR parcel, we till it, we can timber it, we hunt it, we do everything. Currently, that property is owned by Barry Waterman. Originally, it was sold to Lou Schaefer. Everybody's honored it. It's worked fine. But there are issues because it's still a part of what Barry owns. His predecessor never paid for it because we kept all the beneficial interest out of it. But it just makes sense to be able to cut that line. If you take out the piece over reconfigure and you read Stephanie's report in that light, it has no effect on what's being encumbered by the TDR, what the restrictions are on that land. It does nothing but change ownership. And that's all we're trying to do is be able to cut those lines on these adjoining farms where it's appropriate to cut them. For example, it's mostly about tillage. I mean, where we wanted to cut on our farm, for example, huge ravine, left 8 or 10 acres that more properly should be tilled with our farm, are being tilled with our farm because of the easement, not because we got to subdivide it. But it's just appropriate when you go to subdivide to be able to subdivide in a way that makes sense for the continued farming operation of the two farms. Shirley Schaefer's is even more complicated. I was proposing this text amendment about 2 years ago. Amy suggested to me that the county's probably going to look at all this because it's pointed out by Stephanie, it's just not utilized anymore. The TDR program, the NCD program, since the septic bill, there's really no need for it. So these are just historical issues and they're going to keep cropping up. So that's where I'm going with this. I think it addresses most of the issues that Stephanie had because the TDR is going to stay with the same restrictions it always had. The only thing that's going to change is the ownership. The map that's attached is never going to change if you take out the reconfiguration part. The other issue raised is in the previous, or in the actual text amendment that's before you, I identified why we wanted to do it. I don't think that's necessary. I think the text amendment should just say it permits administrative subdivision only to accommodate lot line adjustments. All I'm asking for. It doesn't have to get into building pads, perk sites, or anything else because you're going to be allowed to do on that TDR parcel what you're allowed to do under the ordinance, period. Not asking for anything extra. The only thing I'm asking for, subdivide it so that the gentleman that owned the two farms can properly reconfigure the properties that make sense going forward to operate the farm. In Shirley Schaefer's case, it's more complicated. She's got the adjoining property owner's going to buy her property. It's about 300 acres. She wants to retain what amounts to about 60 or 70 acres. but it cuts both ways here. Shirley'd like to keep about 18 acres. We can't subdivide and leave with her because of the TDRs. The purchasers have about 5 acres they'd like to obtain that they can't get because of the TDRs. If this isn't approved, I'm gonna create 2 reciprocal easements that give them, Shirley the right to use her 18 acres, the other right to use their 5 acres. But why go through all those gyrations? Because there's no offense to the ordinance. There's no land use reason to deny the ability to subdivide as long as all of the land use restrictions and the land itself, not gonna move, not reconfigured, remain the same. The only thing I'm asking to change is ownership. I don't know if Stephanie has any, because we had talked, and
Yeah.
I understand her concerns, and again, unintended consequences on my part, not my intent.
I think it might be valuable if you're looking to entertain what Jeff had said, would be to indicate that it cannot be reconfigured, just because that way it's put out, that is protected land, permanently preserved. So I think if you indicate in that same language that Jeff said that it may not be, or that it's prohibited for reconfiguration, that would probably be advisable, I think.
Oh, Stephanie, I think you could easily, within the amendment that he has, have it say may only be administratively subdivided but not reconfigured. And then just cross off all the other language, and may not be used to create additional lots.
But also, as Stephanie pointed out, that section 18-104, the actual, that addresses what has to be contained in the actual covenant that's recorded among the land records. And it does say a covenant that transfer parcel may not be subdivided or reconfigured. Any amendment to this would necessitate a change that would say something like, except in the case of an approved administrative subdivision. That's it. That's pretty easy.
Or the subdivision, but still not reconfigured.
Right, and as a part of the administrative subdivision, that document would have to be redrafted.
Approved, yeah.
Approved.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm confused. So,
Me too.
okay. Is it possible to, I mean, we're looking at this text amendment, I've looked at it, I've studied it, I've looked at it again, and now I'm jotting notes from Lindsay. Is it possible that this text amendment be redone and reworded for exactly what its intent is, rather than us patching something together right here and now?
I was gonna suggest, if I could get together, Ms. Jones, and work up something to present to you that then would be presented to commissioners, that would make more sense. I just can't
Makes a
do it. I
lot more
can't do it
sense to
unless.
us than
Thank you.
it does.
No, it has to come from you, it can't come from me, because we're not in the first 10 days of February. That was my,
Right.
That can be done. So then you would come back next month. The one thing we would have to do, we would have to ask for an extension from the commissioners. I think it's a valid extension. Obviously, you're having a discussion. You want to see the edited language, specifically what Jeff is requesting. So I would
With the
just,
recommendation of what the exact wording would be.
right, so we can, I can take that to them next week and just ask for the extension.
Does that sound good to you guys?
It seems
Yes,
appropriate.
ma'am.
Okay.
Okay.
thank you
Sounds like a
all.
plan.
And sorry about all my unintended consequences and the effort Stephanie had to go to, but she warned me it was coming, and I assured her I didn't want any of those things, so I think we're good.
Mr. Thompson, can I request that there be some sort of graphic illustration? Like, we're used to PowerPoints that show us all pretty maps. They're very helpful. I'm a graphic person, visualization person.
I can-
In your example of your farm is Schaefer's farm,
Why don't we use
if you
Ms.
can
Sha-
say, I want to move this blue piece over to this piece, and I want to move this line over to here, I think it would
Use
help.
hers,
in
use
our-
hers because it's
in-
more, it's
For
more
text amendment.
complicated.
And the laws kind of changed. In my case, the assessment office actually created a parcel that we don't own. I mean, there's a parcel shown on your tax maps that would indicate Barry owns it, but it's ours, and it's created as a separate parcel. They won't do that anymore. For
Is
Mr.
Barry paying your
Schaefer.
taxes? Is Barry paying your taxes?
No, the agreement says we're gonna pay him, but they accommodated us more than they should have. They actually created a parcel, and we get the bill for that 11 acres, even though Barry owns it. They don't do that anymore. I don't know how many, 5 or 6 years ago, I'm representing the county, but the finance office at a tax sale, and we're sitting there, and the next thing you know, they're auctioning off a 10,000 square foot cell tower site. I had to stop to say, what are we doing? We can't sell a tower. It's part of a farm. And so I had to cancel that, and since they haven't done that, the assessment office used to be accommodating solar, it's the same way. You know, they'll cut it out